This is how I get guitars to pop out of the speakers and sound super wide. It's how I get all of my instruments to sit really nicely with my drums and vocals and bass. So next up, we're going to do the instruments bus. And this is where everything goes, like guitars, keys, synths, all of that. Anything that isn't drums, bass, or vocals, essentially. The first thing that I have on here, you'll be surprised to see, is an API channel strip plugin. Again, just really, really great for doing shaping and subtle compression. This has 1.5:1 ratio, 3 millisecond attack, soft knee, and it's really, really good for just poking the tops of things back into the mix. I'm just really good at gluing things together. And I love this 560 style EQ because it has all the right frequencies on it for me. Like, if I want more sizzle on guitars, I'm going for 4K. If I want more mid-range gnarliness, it's 2K. If I want more tone, it's 1K. If it's muddy, I'm taking 500 out. If I need more upper body, it's 250. If I need more girth, it's 125. And then, you know, I can taper the low end down and I can taper the high end down. So, you know, I don't often need to boost 8K, but like, this is quite a typical thing that will happen. Do you know what I mean? Just sounds good. I can filter it if I want. A nice big fader so that I can make sure I'm gain staged. Again, I tend to have things sort of hovering around unity gain or -12 all the time, like on my buses, and then I make the adjustments here for the whole thing. That way I know that my gain staging is really consistent mix to mix, and just gives me a quick workflow. It's something that I teach a lot of my students as well. Like, just keep it consistent, know where you're at, and you'll start noticing patterns. So the next plugin we have is this Millennia EQ. I like this plugin. It's big and it looks posh. I don't know if it's better than Pro Q, but I like the workflow of it. So what I'll do towards the end of the mix, everything's sounding good, I'll try and like get everything to start popping out of the speakers, particularly on the instrumental bus. So what I'll do is I'll like find a nice tone, like 2.5K, a broad boost. Oh, that sounds good. And then I'll come on here and I'll be like, 5K maybe. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? And then, yeah, low end, maybe like there, just a little bit nice and broad. Just doing like almost back sandal type boosts. But then what you can do is you can unlink it, stick it in mid side, and you can take those boosts out of the center channel. So now you're only boosting the sides. You know it sounds good because you've done it in stereo, but like, I don't want to boost 2.5K in the center of my instruments bus because it's going to start treading on my vocal. I might even want to take a little bit out, you know? You have to be careful with stuff like this because you can mess up your phase, but I do this a lot and it sounds great. And then when people get their mixes, they're like the guitars are jumping out the sides of the speakers. This is basically one of the ways that I do it. It's got a trim on it, so you can gain match, nice on and off button. And then it's got this twin topology thing. So this is like super, super subtle. Sometimes I play with it, sometimes I don't, you know? Busy lives, innit? So next up we have the Vitalizer by SPL. It's great, it's stereo expander, stereo widener basically. This just pushes things super wide. I don't think it messes with the stuff in the middle. I think it just does mid-side processing, but I don't like doing this on the mix bus, and I don't like doing this on like drums and stuff. What I want is the drums and the bass to have a really, really solid, cohesive image in the center. So I don't do any stereo widening stuff with drums really. And then that way, just putting this on my instruments bus means that like all the pads, guitars and everything will go like poof, and wrap around like the really solid punchy drums and bass in the center. Same with vocals really. Sometimes I'll use this like soft tight thing. It can be a good way of just like shaping it. If you've got a load of really like baggy, flabby guitar recordings, you can just, it's quite quick to tighten them up with that. Again, very gently, like you do too much with it, you go all the way over here and it just gets well weird. Most of the time this is on 7 and that's all it ever does, but it's on most of my mixes. And then we have sidechains. We've got a few different ones on this. This one, instrument 3, SGSC. If you watch the drum part of this, then you'll know that that stands for snare gate sidechain. And I make a MIDI node for my kick and snare hits at the beginning of every mix. I normalize the velocities, so every velocity hit is 100 on those. You never hear them, but they're like a little, and they're triggering gates and sidechain compression throughout the mix. So this will just do like 1 dB, and that's just really, really handy. If your snare's getting lost, you can just turn this on, turn the snare up a little bit, it will bridge the gap, and then before you know it, your snare's just poking through as much as you want it to, not too much. And again, I have the same thing here. So sometimes the snare, I'll have it sitting exactly where I like it in the mix, but it doesn't feel like punchy or hefty enough in the low end. Like it's easy to get like the crack, I find, to poke through in a mix, but getting the boof, boof, like punch of a snare to cut through in a mix can be quite tricky. So this just helps me do that. And again, it's just going to do like 1 or 2 dB of gain reduction, and it will just help it cut through a little bit more. And then lastly, we have this, and this is just doing, where's this set to? 1K, 3K, and this is triggered off of bus 255, which you'll see is Vox. So now when the vocal's getting at its loudest point, it'll start carving out some mid-range from the instruments bus. So it basically means the overall mid-range of the mix isn't getting too in your face. Yeah, again, this only ever does like 1 or 2 dB. It's super subtle, but it allows me to get my mixes a little bit louder. With all these sidechains, I can get my mix transparently 1 or 2 dB louder than I could without. Not that loudness is the end goal, but if I started submitting quiet mixes to everyone, they'd be like, why does it sound so bad? You know? That's the instrumental bus. So don't forget, you can download this template from the link below. And if you've got any questions, just leave them in the comments. Shred and art.